The first thing I heard after dying was the alarm I had once hated more than any human voice. Not thunder, not angels, not the dramatic ringing people talk about in novels, but my own phone screaming beside my pillow at 4:45 a.m., the exact sharp little tune I had set in my final year of university because everyone in room 608 depended on me to wake them. I opened my eyes to the dark blue ceiling of the dormitory, my throat burning with a scream that never came out, my fingers clawing at the bedsheet like I was still gripping the railing of the hospital stairs where I had fallen in my last life. For 3 frozen seconds, I did not breathe. Then the alarm chirped again, cheerful and cruel, and I turned my head toward the opposite bed where Elise Hahn was sleeping with her silk eye mask crooked over one eyebrow, her expensive white headphones still on, her mouth slightly open in the peaceful expression of someone who had never paid for her own mistakes. Under her bed, a row of oral exam flashcards was scattered like fallen teeth. On the desk beside her, her phone was face down, dead, plugged into a charger that had not been connected to the wall. In my first life, I had jumped down from my top bunk, shaken her awake, woken every girl in the room, let my notes, shared my alarm routine, carried 2 of their exam slips, and practically dragged them across campus in the rain. That morning, I saved all of them. By sunset, they had saved themselves by burying me. I sat up slowly, still clutching the blanket to my chest. The room smelled exactly as it had that day: stale instant coffee, lavender body spray, wet socks by the heater, and the faint metallic tang from the old radiator that clicked every 10 minutes. 7 girls slept around me in the cramped dormitory, unaware that this morning was the hinge on which all our lives turned. Oral exams started at 7. Attendance closed at 6:45. The professor in charge, Dr. Markovich, was famous for one thing: the door shut on time and no tears reopened it. In my first life, room 608 had made it by 6:39 because I had been the only one paranoid enough to set 5 alarms on 3 devices. Everyone called me ridiculous for it. Everyone mocked me for sleeping with my phone under my pillow. Everyone borrowed my panic, my preparation, my notes, my chargers, my emergency printed forms, my extra hair ties, my throat lozenges, my perfect memory of exam room numbers. Then, after Elise swapped my oral exam topic card in the corridor and I froze during questioning, she whispered that I had been unstable for weeks. The others nodded. They said I had screamed at them that morning. They said I had hidden their admission slips and only returned them after they begged. They said I had threatened to report Elise because I was jealous of her scholarship ranking. By the end of the disciplinary meeting, I was the girl with concerning behavior. By graduation, I was the cautionary joke. By the time I died, alone on a hospital stairwell after a collapse from exhaustion and fever, Elise was giving interviews about resilience. My phone shrieked again. I slapped it silent. The tiny screen glowed 4:46 a.m., Wednesday, Clinical Foundation's oral examination day. My old life folded itself over the present like transparent paper, every line matching perfectly. I remembered the order of disaster. At 4:50, Maya would roll over and groan, "Lena, shut it off." At 5:05, Priya would ask whether she could borrow my spare black blazer because hers still smelled like cafeteria oil. At 5:15, Elise would pretend to wake in a panic, saying her phone mysteriously died, and I would give her my portable charger without asking why the wall plug beside her bed had been pulled loose. At 5:25, I would discover that the dorm's shared kettle had no water because someone had used the last of it and left it hot. At 5:40, the corridor bathroom would flood because 2 sinks were clogged, and everyone would scream that they needed my compact mirror, my dry shampoo, my extra stockings, my printed campus map, my throat spray. At 6:10, we would run. At 6:28, Elise would trip into me outside the faculty building and my stack of topic cards would scatter. At 6:31, she would return the wrong card with wide, innocent eyes. At 7:12, I would sit before 3 examiners and realize my prepared case on neonatal jaundice had become an adult cardiology scenario I had never reviewed. At 7:18, my mouth would dry up, Elise's testimony would be born, and my life would begin sliding toward the grave. I climbed down from the top bunk without making the ladder squeak. That was the first difference. In my first life, I had been loud with responsibility, loud with fear, loud with the exhausting belief that if I made myself useful enough, people would stop treating me as disposable. Now I moved like a thief in my own room. I took my phone, my cheap digital watch, and the small battery-powered travel alarm from inside my pillowcase. Then I reached under my mattress and pulled out the paper envelope I knew would be there. My past self had labeled it oral exam backup in blue pen, admission slip, student ID photocopy, printed timetable, spare transit card, 2 throat lozenges, emergency 10 lari note, and a folded campus map even though the exam hall was a 7-minute walk away. I stared at the envelope until my eyes burned. This little paper packet had been the difference between order and chaos for all of room 608. They had laughed when they found out I made one. They had called it my survival kit, my grandma file, my panic folder. Then, when I saved them with it, they used that same habit as proof that I was controlling. In the disciplinary hearing, Elise had tilted her head and said, it was like she wanted us dependent on her. She kept everyone's information. It felt planned. Planned. The word had followed me for years. This time, I put the envelope into my backpack and zipped the pocket shut. I changed in silence behind my curtain, pulling on my navy skirt, press blouse, and blazer I had ironed the night before. I braided my hair instead of leaving it loose, because in the first life Elise had stepped on it in the corridor during the trip, and I had lost a hair clip, cried from pain, and looked disheveled in front of the examiners. I slid my student ID into a plastic holder around my neck, then tucked the holder inside my blouse, so it could not be grabbed. My throat felt raw from memory, so I drank water from my own bottle, not from the shared cups by the sink. I applied a thin layer of lip balm, packed my notes, checked that my exam topic confirmation email was downloaded offline, and turned off the screen brightness on my phone. I did everything with an odd calm that frightened me more than panic would have. Because beneath the calm was another sound, the echo of Elise's voice at my funeral. She had come, of course. People like Elise came to funerals the way they attended award ceremonies, dressed perfectly, carrying flowers that made cameras kinder. She had stood beside my mother, dabbed her eyes, and murmured, Lena was always under so much pressure. I wish she had let us help her. My mother had believed her. At 4:58, Elise stirred. Not fully awake, just enough for her hand to wander toward her nightstand, patting blindly for the phone that could not wake her. I froze by my desk. In the first life, that tiny movement had filled me with pity. She looked younger when half asleep, not like the smiling queen of the faculty who could make professors laugh and classmates obey, but like a girl who might fail if no one helped her. I had whispered her name. She had jerked awake beautifully, lashes trembling, then grabbed my wrist and said, Lena, thank God. I owe you my life. She never paid debts in anything but knives. Now I watched her fingers touch the dead phone, hesitate, and fall away. Her breathing deepened again. The room remained silent except for the radiator click. I should have felt guilty. A normal girl would have. A kind girl. A version of me who had not heard 7 dorm mates lie in unison would have crossed the room and woken her. But I was not normal anymore. I had learned that some people did not drown because they lacked a rope. They drowned because they had cut every rope handed to them, then blamed the river. I opened my notes one last time, but the words blurred. The case I had prepared was still neonatal jaundice. In my first life, I had known every step. Bilirubin metabolism, risk factors, kernicterus warning signs, phototherapy indications, breastfeeding jaundice versus breast milk jaundice. I had practiced aloud until my voice cracked. I had even helped Elise rehearse the same topic after she claimed she was too anxious to understand the flow. Later, she had taken my correct card and given me her unprepared one. The beauty of her trick was its softness. No one saw a shove, they saw papers falling. No one saw theft, they saw confusion. No one heard her whisper, "Oops, yours," because the corridor was noisy. I had accepted the card she handed me because I trusted the face she wore. This morning, I did not trust faces. I trusted timestamps, pockets, witnesses, and locked zippers. I pulled a black marker from my pencil case and wrote my name on the back of my topic card in 3 places, not large enough to look paranoid, but clear enough that no one could hand me a stranger's card without consequence. Then I took a photo of it beside my watch showing the time. Small evidence, maybe useless, but I had died once from having only the truth and no proof. At 5:07, Maya groaned from the bunk below mine. "Lena," she mumbled into her pillow. "Your alarm." I said nothing. The alarm was off. She waited, irritated by the absence of a sound she had expected me to manage for her. "Lena," she tried again, louder. I was standing 3 feet away, fully dressed, backpack on one shoulder, watching her face wrinkle in confusion through the dimness. She did not open her eyes. In our room, everyone knew I woke early. Everyone also knew they did not need to set alarms because I would panic enough for all of us. It was a system they mocked but relied on. 5 more minutes, Maya whispered, as if giving me permission to keep living on her behalf. I touched the doorknob. That was when Priya rolled over and said, "Wake us at 5:30, okay? Not too early." I need shower first. Not a request. A command, tossed from sleep to the girl who always obeyed because she feared being disliked more than exhaustion. My fingers tightened around the knob until the cold metal hurt. In my first life, Priya had cried in the hearing and said, Lena was furious that morning. She kept saying we'd all fail without her. I think she wanted control. Priya, who had borrowed my blazer, my stockings, my notes, my throat spray, and my emergency taxi cash, had sobbed as if I were the storm and she merely a wet leaf. I opened the door. The corridor was dark, the air colder than the room. Behind me, Priya muttered, "Don't forget." I whispered, so softly only I could hear it, "I won't." Then I stepped out and pulled the door shut without letting it slam. The click sounded like a verdict. The dormitory hall before dawn had always seemed ugly to me. Stained cream walls, flickering lights, posters about academic integrity curling at the edges, someone's laundry bag abandoned near the stairs like a collapsed body. Today it looked almost holy. Every closed door was a sealed future. I walked past room 606, where 2 boys were already arguing over flashcards. Past room 604, where someone's alarm rang and a sleepy voice cursed it. Past the shared bathroom, where the fluorescent light buzzed over a line of empty sinks. No flood yet. No screaming yet. Because I was early. Because I was alone. Because disaster, I realized, was not an event waiting to happen. Sometimes disaster was a group of people waiting for one responsible girl to absorb the cost of their laziness. I reached the stairwell and paused. In my previous life, years later, I had fallen in a hospital stairwell with a fever, clutching a folder of appeal documents nobody wanted to read. My last thought had not been noble. It had not been forgiveness or regret. It had been anger so pure it felt clean. I wish I had let them sleep. Now the universe, God, fate, whatever cruel clerk managed second chances, had handed me the exact morning and whispered, "Prove it." Outside, the campus was wet with night rain. The trees along the path shook water onto the pavement whenever wind moved through them, and the old medical sciences building glowed at the far end of the courtyard like a ship. I pulled my hood up and walked fast, not running. Running made people remember you. Running made you look guilty. I reached the faculty building at 5:31. The front doors were locked until 6, but the side entrance near the anatomy wing opened for exam candidates with ID. In my first life, I had never known that, because I had been dragging half-dressed dorm mates through puddles while Elise cried about her dead phone. This time, I scanned my card, slipped inside, and felt the warm air wash over my face. 2 students were already seated on the benches near the oral exam corridor, whispering nervously over notes. Neither looked at me twice. I chose a bench beneath the security camera, sat with my backpack between my feet, and sent one message to myself in a private chat I had created years ago for reminders. Arrived at exam building 534. Alone. Room 608 still asleep when I left. It was not poetry. It was ammunition. At 5:42, a man from administration passed carrying a stack of sign-in sheets. "Early," he said, surprised. I recognized him immediately. Mr. Vartan, assistant coordinator, kind in the tired way of people who had seen too many student crises and not enough funding. In my first life, he had been at the disciplinary meeting, silent while Elise performed concern. He had looked at me with pity, but said nothing. Now he stopped near my bench. You are Lena Park, yes? Room A candidates should wait upstairs after 6. Yes, sir, I said. I wanted to avoid the dorm rush. He smiled faintly. Wise. Half the cohort acts shocked every exam morning, as if calendars are a new invention. He moved on. I watched him go, struck by the strange unfairness of it. Adults often saw the truth in jokes, but by the time truth became evidence, they asked why you had not documented it properly. So, I documented everything. When the clock above the corridor clicked to 5:45, I took another photo, my shoes on the faculty floor, the wall clock in frame. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Real. My phone buzzed at 5:58. For one stupid second, my heart leapt, thinking room 608 had woken, that guilt would arrive in the shape of a message and drag me back into the role I had escaped. But it was only an automated campus reminder. Oral examinations today. Candidates must arrive by 6:45. Late arrival may result in forfeiture. I stared at the word forfeiture. It was such a polite term for ruin when applied to the wrong person, and such a reasonable consequence when applied to everyone else. At 6 o'clock, the building unlocked. Students began flowing in, damp coats, pale faces, trembling hands clutching notes. The air filled with the scent of coffee and fear. I saw Nathan from physiology, who had once told me I was too intense about exams and now looked like he might swallow his own tongue. I saw Anika, who waved and said, "You made it early." I smiled. Couldn't sleep. That was true in more ways than she could imagine. She sat beside me for 10 minutes and asked a question about neonatal jaundice. I answered clearly, not too much, not with the desperate generosity of my first life. When she thanked me, I said, "You know it. Just structure it." Boundaries, I discovered, could be small and still feel like rebellion. At 6:12, the first message came from Maya. "Lena, you up?" I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. Then, why is everyone still sleeping? My thumb hovered over the screen. In the first life, Maya had been the loudest in the corridor, shouting, "Lena has the slips. Lena, hurry." Later, she had told investigators I had created panic. I locked my phone and placed it face down on my lap. My pulse hammered. It would have been easier if they were strangers. That was the ugliest part. These were not cartoon villains twirling knives. Maya had once shared soup with me when I had a cold. Priya had painted my nails before the winter formal. Tessa had cried into my shoulder after failing biochemistry. June had stayed up late helping me fix a presentation animation. Elise herself had braided my hair during orientation week and said we should survive university together. People who hurt you are rarely cruel every minute. That is how they stay close enough to reach your throat. At 6:15, Priya called. I watched her name flash until it stopped. Then Elise called. My body reacted before my mind did. My stomach clenched, my mouth went dry, and a thin sweat broke under my collar. The screen showed her contact photo, the one she had chosen herself on my phone as a joke. Elise smiling with her chin in her hand, hair glossy, eyes bright, the kind of face teachers trusted before she spoke. The phone vibrated in my palm. I imagined answering. I imagined her breathless voice. "Lena, where are you? Why didn't you wake us? Please, please," my phone died. I imagined myself softening because fear makes even liars sound human. Then I remembered her in the hearing, hands folded, voice trembling just enough. I don't want Lena punished. I just want her to get help. Help had looked like suspension. Help had looked like losing my scholarship. Help had looked like my mother taking extra cleaning shifts because my funding disappeared. Help had looked like me smiling through interviews while Elise won awards using research data I had organized. I declined the call. At 6:17, the room 608 group chat exploded. "Where are you? Did you leave already?" Why didn't alarm ring? Lena answer. Does anyone know exam room?
My phone battery dead. Who is my slip?
Wake up Tessa. OMG bathroom line. We're late. The messages came so fast they blurred. I did not open the chat fully, so the read receipts would not betray me. The little preview banners stacked like panicked birds. At 6:20, Elise wrote, Lena, please, this isn't funny. My breath caught, not from guilt, but from recognition. That sentence. This isn't funny. She had used it in my first life when I hesitated to lend her my perfected oral exam outline because I still needed it. She used it whenever someone failed to immediately turn themselves into a resource. A normal request asks, entitlement accuses. I slipped the phone into airplane mode. The silence after the buzzing stopped was so sudden, I nearly laughed. At 6:25, candidates were allowed upstairs. I joined the line at the sign-in desk beneath another camera. Mr. Vartan checked my ID. Admission slip? I handed it over. He marked my name. Topic card. I showed him my neonatal jaundice card with my name on the back. He nodded. Good.
Keep that with you.
Do not exchange cards with anyone. We had issues last semester. The word struck me so hard I almost missed my answer. Issues.
He sighed.
Students panicking, claiming accidental swaps. The committee has no patience today. Whatever card you present at sign-in is recorded. In my first life, I had arrived with 7 girls screaming around me, hair wet, documents mixed, Elise sobbing that she could not find her slip. The sign-in had been chaos. No one had looked carefully at my card.
No one had recorded the back.
A system existed, and panic had blurred it. This time, I stood alone, card steady, while Mr. Vartan wrote, and J14 beside my name. The ink dried like protection. At 6:32, I sat outside room A. Through the tall window at the end of the corridor, I could see the path from the dormitories. Students hurried across campus in scattered groups. None of them were my roommates yet. Rain had started again, thin and slanted. My phone, still in airplane mode, felt hot in my pocket though it was silent. I imagined room 608 at that moment. Elise sitting up with her dead phone, Priya digging through laundry for her blazer, Maya shaking Tessa, June cursing the bathroom, someone accusing someone else of taking the hair straightener, all of them looking toward my empty bunk as if I had committed a crime by not existing where they needed me. The image should have satisfied me. Instead, it hollowed me out. Revenge in stories tastes sweet because stories skip the body. Real revenge tastes like acid and adrenaline. It asks you, again and again, whether you are becoming cruel or merely refusing to be consumed. I pressed 2 fingers to my wrist and counted my pulse. 112.
Alive.
At 6:38, I heard running. Not from the stairs, from memory. In my first life, this was the minute we reached the faculty doors. I had been soaked through, Elise gripping my sleeve, Priya wearing my blazer, Maya holding my backup envelope because her hands were less shaky, Tessa crying that she would vomit, June yelling that the examiners would understand. I had believed urgency could excuse anything. Outside room A, Elise had stumbled into me. Papers had flown. A boy had laughed nervously. Elise had crouched, gathered cards, and placed one into my hand. Yours, she had said. Then she looked into my eyes with something too quick to name. Not guilt.
Excitement.
Like a gambler watching dice land exactly as planned. I did not understand until too late. Now the corridor was orderly. Students murmured. Mr. Vartan's pen scratched. The door to room B opened. A pale boy stepped out looking relieved. No one crashed into me. No one touched my card. No one wore my blazer. No one had my life in their hand. At 6:46, attendance closed. The coordinator, Professor Sato, walked to the sign-in desk and said, "No further candidates for the first block." Mr. Vartan drew a line beneath the last name. Such a small gesture. One horizontal line, and the world split into those who had arrived and those who had not. My throat tightened. I thought of the girls in room 608 reaching the courtyard now. Maybe, or still fighting with wet hair and dead phones. I did not know. I had chosen not to know. But the line had been drawn. Dr. Markovich's door opened at 6:58. Lena Park, he called. In the first life, hearing my name had felt like stepping onto a trapdoor. Today, I stood with my topic card in my hand, my notes closed, my ID visible, and walked into the exam room without looking back. The examiners sat behind a long table, Dr. Markovich in the center, Professor Sato on the left, and a pediatric registrar I did not recognize in my first life because fear had erased her face. Today I noticed everything. The registrar had a silver pen shaped like a syringe. Professor Sato's glasses were fogged at the edges from hot tea. Dr. Markovich had written my candidate number at the top of the sheet before I entered. Good morning, Ms. Park. Please present your topic. My hands trembled once, then steadied. Good morning. My topic is neonatal jaundice, card NJ14. I placed the card on the table. Dr. Markovich glanced at the back, saw my name, and nodded. Proceed. For one bright second, I saw the ghost of my first life sitting in this same chair, staring at a cardiology case, lips parted, mind blank, while Elise's stolen future unfolded outside. I wanted to reach across time and hold that girl. I wanted to tell her she was not stupid. She had been ambushed. Then I inhaled and began. I spoke like a girl who had already lost everything and discovered that survival leaves room for precision. I defined neonatal jaundice. I explained unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, physiologic versus pathologic timing, ABO incompatibility, prematurity, bruising, G6PD deficiency, and breastfeeding issues. When Dr. Markovich interrupted with, "A baby presents at 18 hours of life with jaundice. Concern," I answered, "pathologic until proven otherwise, because onset within the first 24 hours suggests hemolysis or another serious cause." When Professor Sato asked about kernicterus, I described bilirubin crossing the blood-brain barrier, acute signs, long-term neurologic damage. The registrar asked about management thresholds. I explained that treatment depends on age and hours, bilirubin level, gestational age, and risk factors, phototherapy for significant elevations, exchange transfusion for severe or refractory cases, plus addressing underlying causes. My voice did not shake. Halfway through, something strange happened. I stopped performing for the dead version of myself and began answering as the living one. Knowledge, I realized, had never abandoned me. People had simply shoved me into the wrong question and called my silence proof. At 7:19, Dr. Markovich leaned back. Well structured. Final question. What would you say to a mother who is afraid phototherapy means her baby is being punished or harmed? It was not on the topic sheet. In my first life, unexpected questions had become cliffs. This time, I smiled slightly. I would explain that phototherapy is a treatment using specific light to help change bilirubin into a form the baby can eliminate more easily. I would reassure her that the baby's eyes are protected, temperature and hydration are monitored, and that her concern is understandable. I would avoid dismissing her fear because frightened parents need clarity, not embarrassment. The registrar's pen paused. Professor Sato's expression softened. Dr. Markovich made a note. Thank you, Ms. Park. Please wait outside for preliminary feedback. I stood, bowed my head, and walked out before my knees could fail. The door closed behind me. I pressed my palm to the wall. I had passed. I knew it before they said it. Not because I was arrogant, because no one had stolen my morning. The hallway had changed while I was inside. The orderly murmur had thickened into whispers, and every whisper had the same flavor. Late candidates. A cluster of students stood near the stairwell, craning their necks. Mr. Varton's face was fixed in administrative sympathy, which meant someone was begging. Then I heard Elise. Please, there has to be a way. Our whole room. There was an issue with the alarm system. Alarm system? I almost laughed aloud. Not, I failed to set my alarm. Not, we overslept. An issue with the alarm system, as if our dormitory were a hotel and I were faulty equipment. I stayed near room A, partly hidden by a notice board about clinical professionalism. Elise stood at the sign and desk in a cream cardigan over a half-buttoned blouse, hair damp, cheeks flushed, eyes shining with tears that had not yet committed to falling. Behind her, Priya wore a wrinkled blazer that was not mine this time. Maya had one shoe untied. Tessa was crying openly. June's hair was wet on one side and dry on the other. The whole of room 608 had arrived at 7:24. Professor Sato spoke first. Attendance closed at 6:45. Elise clasped her hands. Professor, we understand, but this was a dorm-wide problem. None of our alarms went off. Lena usually, she stopped. Not because she realized how it sounded, but because she saw me. Her eyes found mine across the corridor, and in that instant all her softness vanished. It was so quick no one else would have caught it. A flat, bright anger flashed beneath the tears.
How dare you, it said.
How dare a tool walk away from the hand? Then the tears returned, prettier than before. Lena, she said, voice breaking. 6 heads turned toward me. The corridor quieted with the savage interest of students smelling drama. You're here. Why didn't you answer? We were calling you. We thought something happened. The wording was perfect.
Concern first.
Accusation underneath. A net thrown with silk thread. In my first life, I would have rushed to explain. I would have apologized for airplane mode, justified leaving early, said I thought they had alarms, offered to speak for them. Maybe even begged the professor on their behalf because guilt would have made me stupid. But second chances are wasted if you keep kneeling at the same altar. I stepped forward slowly, keeping my face confused rather than defensive. Something did happen? I asked. Elise blinked. We overslept. All of you. I let my eyes move over them. Not cruelly, just enough.
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
I left before 5:10 to review. Maya's mouth opened. But you always wake us. There it was. Not hidden, not dressed, not softened. You always wake us. Mr. Vartan looked up from the sheet. Professor Sato's eyebrows lifted. I tilted my head. I wake myself, I said. I didn't realize I was responsible for everyone's alarms. The silence that followed was small but sharp. Priya flushed. Tessa sniffed harder. June looked away. Elise recovered first. No one said responsible, but you knew today was important. We're roommates. We help each other.
Help.
That word, again. I smiled faintly, careful not to show teeth. Of course. That's why I reminded everyone last night to set alarms and charge phones. Elise's expression flickered. Last night. She remembered. In the first life, I had reminded them at 11:30 p.m. after they spent 3 hours watching dramas and testing lipstick shades. Maya had thrown a pillow at me and said, Mom, Lena is anxious again. Priya had said, Relax, your 5 alarms will wake the dead. Elise had smiled without looking up from her phone and said, Then let's hope the dead have exams. This time, the memory stood between us like a witness. Professor Sato turned to the group. You were reminded to set alarms? Priya stammered, I mean, yes, but we thought, she stopped before admitting the thought, that my anxiety was communal property. Elise stepped in. Professor, with respect, this is less about alarms and more about fairness. 6 candidates from one dorm missing the exam suggests an external issue. 7. Maya whispered. Elise shot her a look.
What?
Maya nodded toward me. Lena is from our dorm. The correction landed beautifully. 7 candidates from one dorm, and one had arrived early. The external issue shrank under the fluorescent lights. Mr. Vartan glanced at his sheet. Miss Park signed in at 6:25 and was seen in the building before 6. He did not say more. He did not need to. My timestamps existed, but the building had its own. Elise's tear finally fell. Just one. She was economical with them. So, because Lena left without us, we lose the exam, she whispered. Pattern interruption. In another life, that line would have worked. The corridor would have inhaled in sympathy. Teachers love unity until unity reveals exploitation. But Professor Sato had chaired too many committees to be hypnotized by one tear. No, she said evenly. You lose the first block because you arrived 39 minutes after attendance closed. Dr. Markovich emerged from room A holding my feedback sheet. He assessed the scene in one glance. Late candidates? Room 608, Professor Sato said. They are requesting admission. Dr. Markovich's face did not change. Denied. The word fell like a metal door. Tessa sobbed. Priya whispered, please. Maya looked at me as if I had personally poured sleep into her ears. Elise stared at Dr. Markovich, then at me, and I saw the machine inside her begin turning toward a new strategy. Then I need to report something, Elise said. Her voice trembled, but the tremble had acquired purpose. I didn't want to say this publicly, but Lena has been acting strangely. Last night she was angry at us. She said she was tired of carrying the room. This morning she left without waking anyone, turned off her phone, and now she's pretending she didn't know. It feels intentional. There it was, the old knife drawn early. Around us, students leaned closer. My first life scars burned under my skin. She was not improvising from nothing. She was returning to a path that had worked before. Paint me unstable. Paint my boundary as malice. Make my refusal look like sabotage. The difference was that last time I had arrived messy, late, and confused, holding the wrong topic card. This time I stood calm, signed in, examined, and seen. Still, reputation can be poisoned faster than facts can be arranged. I had to answer carefully. I looked at Professor Sato, not Elise. May I respond? Professor Sato nodded. Briefly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and turned off airplane mode. It began vibrating violently as all the missed calls and messages flooded in. I did not flinch. I left the dorm around 5:08. Before leaving, I did not wake anyone because I assumed every adult candidate had prepared their own alarm. Last night, at 11:32, I reminded the room in the group chat to charge phones, set alarms, pack slips, and sleep. The replies are still there. I opened the chat and held it out, not to the crowd, to Professor Sato. She read. Her mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. Maya had written, stop being dramatic. Priya had sent laughing emojis. June had written, Lena will wake us anyway. Elise had written, imagine failing because of an alarm LOL. I watched Professor Sato scroll once. Evidence did not feel triumphant. It felt heavy, like carrying a body up from underwater. Dr. Markovich took the phone next. Ms. Han, he said, you replied to this reminder. Elise's face paled, then warmed. I was joking. And Miss Park is not dorm staff. His voice remained flat. She is a candidate. Elise's mouth opened, but no words came fast enough. That was the thing about liars who rely on emotional weather. A dry fact can feel like drought. Professor Sato returned my phone. The late candidates may submit a formal petition after the exam block. It will be reviewed under policy. You may not enter this block. But our oral exams are today, Priya said, panic rising. If we miss it, we fail the component. You may petition, Professor Sato repeated. Step away from the sign-in desk. The group moved back as if pushed by an invisible wall. Elise did not move at first. Her eyes locked on mine. For the first time that morning, she stopped pretending to cry. Her face went blank, then smiled. A small smile, private and poisonous.
It said, fine.
Round 2. Dr. Markovich handed me my preliminary feedback sheet. Strong pass, he said. Your structure was clear. You may collect final marks this afternoon. Strong pass. The word struck louder than Elise's accusation. For a moment, the corridor blurred. In my first life, the feedback sheet had said inadequate topic command, poor clinical reasoning under pressure, concerning emotional dysregulation. I had memorized those phrases because they became labels others used on me when they wanted to sound official. Now the paper in my hand said strong pass. My name at the top. My candidate number. My topic. My score range. I wanted to cry, but not here. Not in front of Elise. So I folded it carefully and slid it into my envelope. The next hour became a theater of consequences. Room 608 camped near the stairwell, whispering, calling parents, refreshing policy pages, blaming the rain, blaming the dorm electricity, blaming each other, circling me like wolves who had not yet decided whether the fence was electric. I stayed in the candidate waiting area because students were required to remain until all first block exams ended. Anika returned from her exams shaking but smiling. Nathan came out pale, and said he thought he passed. The normal world continued around us, indifferent to room 608's catastrophe. That indifference fascinated me. In my first life, their panic had filled every corner of my morning until I believed it was reality itself. Now I saw it properly. 6 people making noise inside a much larger system that did not bend simply because they were loud. At 8:05, Elise approached me alone. Her cardigan had dried unevenly at the cuffs. Her hair, usually perfect, frizzed near her temples. She held 2 paper cups from the vending machine and offered one as if we were old friends between lectures. "Peace," she said softly. I looked at the cup. Steam rose from it, smelling like cheap coffee and sugar. In my first life, after the oral exam disaster, she had brought me coffee too. She had sat beside me and whispered, "I'll help fix this." Then she had gone to Professor Sato with tears. I did not take the cup. "No, thank you." Elise's smile thinned. She lowered herself onto the bench beside me anyway, leaving exactly 1 polite inch between us. "You're making this worse than it has to be." "Am I?" "Lena." She sighed, as if disappointed by my immaturity. "We're all under stress. I understand you wanted to prove a point, but this isn't high school. People's futures are at stake." I turned my head and looked at her fully. "Yes, I know." Something in my tone made her eyes narrow. "Then help us petition. Say you forgot to wake us because you were anxious. Not your fault, just a misunderstanding. If you explain that the room had a shared routine, they might let us sit the afternoon block." The audacity was so clean it almost sparkled. She was asking me to build the bridge she would later burn under my feet. You want me to say I forgot a responsibility I never accepted? Don't phrase it like that. How should I phrase it? Like a decent person. I almost smiled. There are insults that reveal more than confessions. To Elise, decency meant usefulness. Kindness meant self-incrimination. Friendship meant I should absorb institutional blame so she could keep her transcript polished. "No," I said. "Just that." A complete sentence, smaller than a breath, heavier than a locked door. Her face changed again. Not dramatically. Elise never wasted expression without an audience. The softness strained. Her voice dropped. "Be careful. People already think you're intense. If you act smug about this, it won't look good." My pulse kicked, but my face stayed still. Is that advice or a threat? It's reality. Then here's reality back. I arrived early. I signed in. I took my exam. I did not touch your phone, your alarm, your charger, your admission slip, or your legs. You overslept. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup until the lid dented. You think this one morning changes anything? It changed my grade. Her eyes flashed. Enjoy it. She stood, still holding both coffees, and walked away. Halfway down the corridor, she stumbled slightly, coffee spilling onto her hand. In another life, I would have jumped up with tissues. Today, Priya rushed to her instead. I watched Elise accept the help without saying thank you. By 8:30, the petition strategy had begun. Room 608 gathered near the notice board, speaking in urgent whispers that were not quiet enough. Maya wanted to claim the dormitory power failed. June pointed out the lights had worked. Priya suggested saying the bathroom flooded. Tessa said the flood happened after they woke, not before. Elise told Tessa to stop being negative. "We need consistency," she said. The word sent a cold line down my spine. Consistency was what she had demanded before they lied about me in the first life. She had gathered them in the laundry room and said, "No one is lying. We're describing how it felt." How it felt. That phrase can launder any falsehood if spoken with enough trembling. I stood to refill my water bottle and let my phone record a voice memo from inside my blazer pocket. Not because I planned to use it immediately, because a dead girl had taught me that memory alone is a witness courts do not call. "Elise," Maya whispered. "What about the group chat?" Lena showed them. "Then we don't deny the reminder," Elise said. "We say she created a dependency and then withdrew without warning." Priya made a nervous sound. "But it sounds true enough," Elise snapped softly. "She always wakes us. She always controls the morning. She likes being needed. Today she punished us. My hand tightened around the water bottle. True enough. That was Elise's kingdom. Not truth, not lies, but phrases close enough to pass in poor lighting. Tessa whispered, but she did remind us. Elise exhaled sharply. Tessa, do you want to repeat the semester? Silence. There was the lever.
Fear.
In my first life, it had moved them all. Fear of failing. Fear of Elise's disapproval. Fear of becoming the next target. I had hated them for lying, but now, hearing the machinery assemble, I understood the shape of their weakness. Understanding did not absolve them. It only made my anger colder. At 8:47, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. For a moment I thought it might be administration. Instead it was Elise, using someone else's phone because I had not answered her calls. Don't make yourself the villain. Say, we had a shared alarm arrangement. You don't have to admit anything else. I stared at the message, then took a screenshot. In my first life, every accusation had arrived wrapped in concern and vanished into air. This time, she kept placing stones in my hand. I did not reply. A minute later, Lena, seriously. I can protect you too. Screenshot. Then, you don't know what people will say if you act like this. Screenshot. I wondered whether rebirth had made me cruel because each message felt less like danger and more like inventory. At 9:10, the first block exams ended. Candidates were released with instructions to check final marks online after 3. I could have left campus. I could have gone to the library, hidden behind shelves, eaten the protein bar in my bag, and avoided the storm. But avoidance had been my first life religion, and it had not saved me. So, I walked to the administrative office and requested a student statement form. Mr. Vartan looked over his glasses. For what matter? A potential false petition involving late arrival, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Formal, adult, clean. He studied me for a moment. You are not required to submit unless asked. I know. I would like the timeline recorded while it's fresh. He handed me the form. Write only what you personally know. I almost thanked him for the advice, then realized it was not kindness. It was procedure. Procedure, when used early, can be armor. I sat at a small table outside the office and wrote in neat block letters. I stated that I reminded room 608 to set alarms at 11:32 p.m. I stated that I left at approximately 5:08 a.m. I stated that I did not agree to wake any candidate. I stated that I arrived at the faculty building before 6, signed in at 6:25, and sat my oral examination. I stated that I later heard late candidates claim a dorm-wide alarm issue and suggest I had intentionally caused their late arrival. I did not call Elise manipulative. I did not describe my death. I did not write that Maya had betrayed me, that Priya had cried lies, that Tessa's silence had cost my mother years of grief. Official forms do not want souls. They want sequence. I gave sequence. Then I attached screenshots of the group chat reminder and Elise's messages from the unknown number. Mr. Vartan read the first page, then the attachments, and his expression hardened into something almost like respect. You should avoid discussing this with them further, he said. Yes, sir. And keep your phone available. Yes, sir. When I stepped out of the office, June was waiting by the vending machine. She had always been the least cruel of them, which in my first life had made her betrayal hurt most. June did not invent lies. She confirmed other people's with a miserable face. She had told the committee, I don't think Lena meant harm, but yes, she was controlling that morning. That sentence had sounded gentle, and still it helped bury me. Now she pushed away from the wall. Lena. I kept walking. She followed. Can we talk? I have nothing to add. Elise is making this intense. I stopped. Elise.
Yun flinchel.
I mean, everyone's scared. And scared people are allowed to lie? No. But, she rubbed her forehead. You know how she gets. She's saying if we don't support the petition, we all fail. She says you'll be fine because you already passed, and we're just asking for a chance. A chance built on blaming me. June's eyes filled with tears. Not pretty tears like Elise's, but tired ones. I don't want to blame you. Then don't. It sounded so simple that for a second she looked almost angry. People trapped in cowardice resent simple doors.
Yun lo theo us.
Did you know we'd oversleep? The question struck me sideways. Not because it was unfair, but because the honest answer belonged to another lifetime. Did I know?
Yes.
I knew the future because I had lived the cost of preventing it. But this morning, in the only reality the world recognized, I had known only that 6 adults had ignored a reminder.
Ihel yunes case.
I knew you were responsible for yourselves. She swallowed. That's not the same.
No.
It's worse because you can't petition against it. June looked away. For a moment, the corridor noise faded, and I saw the younger version of her from orientation week, laughing with a mouth full of noodles, promising we would all become doctors together. Then I saw her in the hearing, refusing to meet my eyes. The past and present overlapped until pity and disgust became one color. June, I said, softer despite myself. Elise will ask you to describe how you felt. She'll tell you feelings aren't lies. Be careful. Feelings become statements. Statements become records. Records become someone else's punishment. Her face went pale. I left her there with that. At 10 o'clock, room 608 filed their petition. I knew because Elise sent a message to the group chat, not realizing or not caring that I remained inside it. Petition submitted. Everyone stick to what we discussed. Do not answer admins separately without me. I screenshotted. Then Maya replied, should Lena be in this chat? A pause. Elise removed me from the group. The notification appeared like a little gray tombstone. You were removed. In my first life, that removal had happened after the hearing, after they used the chat history, after they decided I was dangerous. I had cried for an hour over being cut from a room that had already gutted me. Today, I looked at the notification and felt nothing except mild inconvenience that I could no longer collect their mistakes in real time. Growth, I thought, sometimes looks like being expelled from a burning house. The rest of the morning stretched strangely. I went to the library, but I did not study. I sat by a window overlooking the wet courtyard and wrote down every first life event I could remember, not as diary confession, but as strategic mapping. Elise's strengths: beauty, timing, emotional control, social debt, professor familiarity, scholarship committee connections. Weaknesses: arrogance under pressure, reliance on verbal manipulation, overconfidence in group loyalty, habit of texting threats when ignored. Maya: loud, impulsive, screenshots rarely considered. Priya: image conscious, afraid of parents. Tessa: anxious, guilt-prone, likely to crack. June: morally uncomfortable, possible witness if protected. I wrote my own weaknesses too, because revenge without self-knowledge becomes suicide with better lighting. Weaknesses: guilt, need to explain, fear of being disliked, physical stress response when accused, tendency to overhelp, no powerful family, scholarship dependence. Then I wrote one sentence at the bottom of the page and underlined it twice. Do not become their emergency exit. At 11:35, my mother called. I stared at the screen until the final ring, then called back before fear could invent reasons not to. Lena? Her voice was bright and breathless. In my first life, after the disciplinary action, her voice had become smaller each month, worn down by bills and shame she tried to hide. Hearing it whole nearly broke me. Mom. Oral exam today, yes? Did you go already? Yes. My throat tightened. I think I did well. She gasped softly, then laughed. Of course you did. You studied like a soldier. In the background, I heard the clatter of dishes from the cafe where she worked mornings. Did you eat? Not yet.
Eat.
Passing while hungry is still bad manners. I smiled, and the smile hurt. I will. She paused. Mothers hear ghosts through phone lines. Are you okay? I looked at my reflection in the dark library window. Braided hair, pale face, eyes older than 23. I'm better than I was yesterday, I said. Good. That is all we need. Better than yesterday. She had no idea how literally I meant it. At noon, The petition response came faster than expected. An email to all involved candidates. Request for late admission denied pending further review. Candidates may attend a procedural meeting at 2 p.m. regarding eligibility for rescheduling under exceptional circumstances. Evidence of external disruption required. I received it because my name had been included in their petition. There it was, official and dangerous. They had tied me to their case. My hands went cold. I opened the attachment. Their statement claimed room 608 operated under a shared morning preparation arrangement, that I had historically controlled alarms and exam documents, that I left without notice after a conflict, and that my refusal to answer calls contributed materially to 6 candidates missing attendance. They did not accuse me of touching their alarms directly.
Elise was too smart for that.
They built a fog instead.
Control.
Conflict. Refusal. Contributed. Words that did not need proof to stain. For exactly 8 seconds, I was back in the old hearing room, fluorescent lights buzzing, my palms sweating onto my skirt, Elise's voice trembling, Professor Sato's pen moving, my own explanations tangling because I was trying to disprove feelings with facts after everyone had already chosen the feelings. Then I inhaled slowly. This time, the fog had arrived after my statement, not before. This time, I had screenshots. This time, I had Mr. Vartan's sign in record, hallway cameras, topic card record, and a voice memo of Elise planning consistency. This time, they had written the lie down early enough for it to be weighed. I forwarded the email to myself, downloaded the attachment, and wrote a supplemental statement correcting every false implication with timestamps. Not angry, not dramatic, just sequence. Sequence is boring until it saves you. At 1:40, I arrived at the procedural meeting room. Not late. Not early enough to look obsessed. The room was smaller than the hearing room of my nightmares, with a round table instead of a panel desk. Professor Sato sat with Mr. Vartan and a student affairs officer named Ms. Ibrahimova. Dr. Markovich was not present. Oral exams were still running. Elise sat on the right side with the rest of room 608. She had repaired herself. Hair smooth. Lip tint fresh. Cardigan replaced by a navy blazer, probably borrowed from Priya. She looked like a scholarship brochure again. Maya sat beside her with crossed arms. Priya stared at the table. Tessa's eyes were swollen.
Jon lukts physically illustration.
When I entered, Elise's face softened into public pain. Lena, she whispered, as if I were the wound. I took the chair opposite her and placed my folder on the table. Not too thick. Thick folders make people think conspiracy. Thin folders make people think preparedness. Ms. Ibrahimova began. This is not a disciplinary hearing. This is a procedural review of late arrival and possible eligibility for rescheduling. However, because the petition references another student's conduct, Ms. Park has been invited to respond. Invited. A nicer word than summoned. We will speak one at a time. We will focus on verifiable facts. Elise nodded earnestly. Of course. Professor Sato turned to her. Ms. Han, summarize the petition. Elise inhaled as if steadying herself against cruelty. We missed the exam because our dorm room had an established system. Lena always set backup alarms for everyone, and she kept the morning organized. Last night there was tension because she felt unappreciated. This morning she left without waking anyone, turned off her phone, and didn't answer when we called. We're not saying she caused everything, but her actions disrupted a routine we reasonably relied on. I almost admired the construction. Not responsible, but relied on. Not sabotage, but disruption. Not accusation, but grief. A knife wrapped in gauze. Professor Sato asked, was Ms. Park formally assigned this responsibility by faculty or resident staff? Elise blinked. No, but did she agree in writing to wake you today? No, but it was understood. By whom? By all of us. Professor Sato made a note. Understanding among peers does not create exam accommodation. Maya leaned forward. But she knew. Knowing an exam is important does not transfer your obligation to another candidate. Maya flushed. Elise touched her arm gently, performing restraint. Professor, we understand policy. We're asking for compassion. 6 students missing an exam because one person changed an established routine without warning. Surely that matters. Ms. Ibrahimova turned to me. Miss Park. My mouth was dry, but my hands were steady when I opened my folder. The routine described was not mutual. I set alarms for myself. Last night, I reminded everyone to set their own alarms and prepare documents. Several replied dismissively, including statements that they expected me to wake them anyway. I left early to prepare for my own examination. I did not remove anyone's alarm, charger, document, or access to the building. I did not agree to be responsible for their attendance. Elise's gaze sharpened. You turned off your phone. I used airplane mode while preparing and during exam procedures. Because you knew we'd call. Because candidates are instructed to avoid phone disruptions. Mr. Vartan cleared his throat. That is correct. Phones are expected silent or off in the exam corridor. Elise shifted. But before that, we called at 6:15. Attendance hadn't closed yet. If she answered, we might have made it. From the dormitory to the faculty building takes at least 7 minutes if already dressed and carrying documents, I said. Your messages indicate you had not located clothing or slips at 6:17. Priya looked up, startled. I slid printed screenshots across the table. Not to Elise. To Ms. Ibrahimova. These are message previews and chat records from this morning. I also included my arrival record and sign-in time, which administration can verify. Ms. Ibrahimova reviewed them. Professor Sato leaned closer. Mr. Vartan's expression did not change, but I saw recognition in his eyes. He had read some of this already. The room quieted, not with sympathy, but with evidence taking up space. Elise recovered by changing the battlefield. Lena has always been like this, she said softly. Documenting people. Saving screenshots. It makes us uncomfortable. It feels like she waits for mistakes. There it was, preparedness recast as predation. I had expected it. Still, it stung. Ms. Ibrahimova looked at me. Do you regularly document your roommates? No, I said. I document exam-related instructions and issues that could affect my academic standing. Because you don't trust us, Maya muttered. I turned to her. Because last semester, 2 students in our cohort were penalized after verbal arrangements were disputed. Faculty advised us to keep records. That was true. Not about me, but true. Professor Sato nodded reluctantly. We did send a general advisory. Elise's mouth tightened. She had forgotten that boring institutional memory often beats dramatic accusation. Then Tessa broke. It happened quietly, almost accidentally. She whispered, I told you we should set alarms. Everyone turned. Elise's hand shot to Tessa's wrist under the table, but we all saw it. Tessa flinched. Ms. Ibrahimova's eyes narrowed. Ms. Rahman, would you like to add something? Tessa's face crumpled. I don't know. Lena did remind us. She always reminds us. We laughed. I thought Maya set one. Maya thought Priya did. Elise said her phone was charging. Mine was under my pillow, but I forgot to turn sound on. Elise's voice was gentle and lethal. Tessa, no one is blaming Lena completely. Tessa looked at her, tears spilling. But the petition sounds like we are. The room changed. Not exploded. Shifted. A floorboard giving way under a carpet. June stared at Tessa, then closed her eyes. When she opened them, something tired and decent had won by a narrow margin. I want to correct my part too, she said. I signed because Elise said it was the only chance. But Lena didn't agree to wake us. We relied on her because it was convenient.
Yuna's voice shook. No.
I'm not getting someone else investigated because I slept through my own exam. Priya began crying silently. Elise released Tessa's wrist and sat back, face perfectly still except for 2 red spots high on her cheeks. For the first time that day, she had misjudged the room. Fear could move people, yes, but too much fear in an official space can make cowardice feel more dangerous than honesty. Ms. Ibrahimova folded her hands. Thank you. The committee will consider the corrected statements. Elise leaned forward. I need to clarify. You have clarified, Professor Sato said.
Her tone ended it.
The meeting lasted another 15 minutes. Maya tried to argue that everyone deserved a reschedule because failing 6 students looked harsh. Professor Sato explained that harshness did not equal unfairness. Priya admitted she had not checked her admission slip until after waking. Tessa stated that no dorm electricity failure occurred. June confirmed that the group had discussed sticking to a version before filing. Elise spoke less after that, which frightened me more than her speeches. Silence from Elise was not surrender. It was storage. At the end, Ms. Ibrahimova said the late candidate's rescheduling request would be denied unless residents' logs showed an external emergency. They would receive 0 for the missed oral component, but could continue other course assessments where policy allowed. No disciplinary action would be taken for lateness itself. However, the petition's mischaracterization of another student would be noted, and any further retaliation would be referred to student conduct. Further retaliation. The phrase entered the room like a guard dog. When we stepped into the hallway, Maya exploded. Are you happy? Her voice cracked loud enough that students turned. You passed, so now you don't care if we fail? I felt the old instinct rise. Explain, soothe, shrink. I killed it. I care that you told the truth. Easy for you to say. No, I said. It was very hard for me to say. Maya scoffed, but she had no weapon sharp enough for that. Priya wiped her eyes and whispered, I'm sorry. It was not grand. It did not erase anything. It was also the first apology anyone from room 608 had ever given me in either life. I nodded once. Tessa could not look at me but said, I'm sorry too. June said nothing, but her shoulders sagged with relief and shame. Elise watched all of it with a faint smile, as if apologies were insects crawling across the floor. Then she stepped close enough that only I could hear. You think you won because they got scared. I met her eyes.
No.
I won because I woke up. Her smile vanished. For a second, I wondered if she heard the double meaning, if something in my face betrayed the impossible. But Elise believed only in strategies, not miracles. This isn't over, she said. In my first life, those words would have followed me into dreams. Today, they sounded almost childish. For you, maybe, I said. For me, the exam is over. I walked away before she could answer. That is a skill no one teaches girls like me. Leave on your own line. Do not stay until the cruel person finds the better ending. At 3:06 p.m., final marks posted. My hands shook when I logged in. Clinical Foundations Oral Examination, 92. High distinction. I stared until the numbers blurred. In my first life, that line had read 38.
Fail.
Required remediation. I had built 3 years of suffering around that number. Now it was gone, replaced by proof that I had always been capable when no one tampered with the question. I took a screenshot, then called my mother again. She answered on the second ring. Did you eat?
Mom.
My voice broke. I got 92. There was silence, then a sound I had never heard from her in my first life after the disaster. A sob of joy. My daughter, she whispered. My brilliant daughter. I turned toward the library window so no one would see me cry. Outside, the rain had stopped. Students crossed the courtyard under a pale strip of sunlight. The world did not become perfect because I passed one exam. My scholarship was not magically safe forever. Elise was still Elise. Room 608 was still my room unless I changed it. But a number can be a door, and mine had opened. I did not return to the dorm until evening. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to choose my next move without breathing the same air as their resentment. At the housing office, I requested an emergency room transfer on academic welfare grounds. The clerk, a bored woman with purple glasses, asked for documentation. I provided the meeting notice, the petition excerpt referencing me, my statement, and Ms. Ibrahimova's note about retaliation. The clerk's boredom sharpened into attention. We have one vacancy in room 412, she said. Quiet floor. Mostly final year pharmacy students. Transfer can be approved tonight if Student Affairs confirms. In my first life, I had stayed in room 608 after the hearing because moving felt like admitting guilt. I had slept under their whispers for months. This time, I signed the transfer form before nostalgia could dress itself as courage. Leaving a toxic room is not defeat. It is ventilation. When I opened the door to room 608 at 6:20 p.m., every conversation stopped. The room looked wrecked. Clothes hung from bed rails, wet towels lay on chairs, exam notes covered the floor, and the air smelled of instant noodles and despair. Maya sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes red, scrolling aggressively. Priya was on a video call with someone who sounded like her father, speaking in a small voice. Tessa lay under her blanket facing the wall.
Yun sat at desk, staring at a blank notebook.
Elise stood by the window, perfectly composed again, brushing her hair. Of course, she had recovered first. Some people process consequences as personal tragedy. Elise processed them as data. "Look who came back," Maya said. I ignored her and pulled my suitcase from under my bed. That got everyone's attention. Priya ended her call. "You're leaving?" "Yes."
Yun turned.
"Where?" "Room 412. Maya laughed bitterly. "Must be nice, running away after ruining everything." I folded my clothes into the suitcase with deliberate care. "You slept past attendance. Because you didn't wake us." "Correct," I said. I did not wake 6 adults for their medical oral exam. The simplicity irritated her more than any insult. Elise set down her brush. A transfer seems dramatic. So did your petition." Priya flinched. Tessa made a small sound under the blanket. Elise's reflection in the window smiled before her face did. "You know, Lena, isolating yourself won't help your reputation. People will ask why you couldn't live with anyone." I zipped one compartment. "Good thing Student Affairs approved the transfer based on the petition you filed." Her brush stopped midair.
"There."
Not panic. Calculation interrupted. My first true pleasure of the day warmed my chest.
Yun stood suddenly.
"Do you need help carrying anything?" Maya stared at her. "Are you serious?" June's face reddened, but she did not sit. In my first life, June's guilt had become silence. Today, maybe because Tessa had cracked first, maybe because the official room had made truth feel safer, she reached for my stack of textbooks. I almost said no. Pride is another kind of cage.
"Thank you," I said.
She carried the books to the door. Tessa emerged from under the blanket, hair messy, face swollen. "I can take the hangers," she whispered. Priya looked between Elise and us, then slowly stood. "I'll help with shoes." Maya cursed and rolled over. Elise watched the room defect in small domestic gestures. Books, hangers, shoes.
No speeches. No revolution.
Just girls choosing, item by item, not to obey her mood. Her face remained calm, but her hand tightened around the brush until the plastic creaked. As I packed, I found artifacts from the old life that were not old yet. The mug Elise had given me for my birthday, printed with Room Mom in pink letters, the shared snack box I had kept refilling, the laminated cleaning schedule in my handwriting, the extra set of drawer labels I had made for everyone during orientation. I placed the mug on Elise's desk. "This is yours." Her lips curved. "I bought it for you." "I know." The silence after that was worth more than an argument. She understood. Gifts that name your usefulness are not gifts. I left the cleaning schedule on the wall. Let them stare at my labor until someone else decided whether to do it. I took my kettle, my extension cord, my medical dictionary, my spare charger, my compact mirror, my emergency sewing kit, my throat spray, my printed campus maps, my backup alarm, and every little object they had treated as dorm property, because I owned it quietly. By the time my suitcase was full, room 608 looked less like a home and more like a stage after the main prop table had been removed. Elise followed me into the corridor.
Of course she did.
Predators dislike witnesses. They prefer corners. June, carrying my books, slowed, but I shook my head. She continued toward the elevator reluctantly. Elise waited until we were alone between the laundry room and the stairwell.
"You're enjoying this," she said.
"Parts of it."
I saw no reason to lie.
"You made everyone turn on me." I laughed once, softly, before I could stop myself. The sound surprised us both. Elise, they told the truth because the alternative finally had consequences. She stepped closer. You think truth matters here? Professors like me. Students listen to me. Scholarships care about consistency, not your little screenshots. Then, be consistent. Her eyes narrowed. I shifted my suitcase handle to my left hand and looked directly at the black dome of the hallway camera above the laundry door. Elise followed my gaze. Her jaw tightened. In my first life, she had chosen corners perfectly. This time, I chose the corridor. She lowered her voice. I could have been your friend. There it was, the oldest bait. Not apology. Not regret. A door painted onto a wall. No, I said. You could have been someone I kept helping. For a moment, the mask cracked badly enough that I saw the ugly young fear underneath. Not fear of failing, exactly. Fear of losing the invisible throne built from everyone else's concessions. You don't know what it's like, she hissed. Everyone expects me to be perfect. One mistake and my father, she stopped. A real thing had almost escaped her. In my first life, I would have softened. I would have imagined her pressure, her family, her scholarship, the loneliness beneath her polish. I would have used her pain as an excuse for my own destruction. This time, I let the unfinished sentence fall. Then don't make mistakes that require victims, I said. The elevator dinged. June called my name. I walked away. Room 412 smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. It had 4 beds instead of 8, 2 wide windows, and a silence so unfamiliar I stood in the doorway gripping my suitcase like a refugee. A tall pharmacy student named Nino waved from a desk covered in color-coded labels. You're the transfer? Bed by the window. We sleep early before exams. Alarms are personal. Shared kettle is on the left. If you use the last water, refill it. I almost cried from the beauty of rules spoken without manipulation.
Perfect, I said.
She looked amused. Most people don't call kettle rules perfect. Most people haven't lived in room 608. She nodded solemnly, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. June set my books on the desk and hovered. I'm sorry, she said finally. For today? For almost not saying anything. I looked at her, at the girl who in one life had failed me completely, and in this one had stepped back from the edge. Rebirth had not made forgiveness easier. It had made judgment more precise. Don't apologize to get relief, I said. Change what you do next. June swallowed and nodded. Then she left. That night, I slept for 11 hours.
No nightmares. No stairwell.
No hearing room. No Elise crying over my grave. Just sleep, deep and black, while my backup alarm sat on the desk unused. When I woke at 7:30, sunlight filled the room and Nino was already gone, leaving a sticky note on the kettle. Refilled. Welcome. I stared at the note for a long time. Kindness without debt felt suspicious at first, then unbearable, then quietly wonderful. I made tea and checked my phone. Messages waited like weather. Priya, I know sorry isn't enough. My parents are furious, but I told them it was my fault. Tessa, thank you for telling June what you said. I think it helped. June. I corrected my written statement. Maya, nothing. Elise, nothing. Silence from Elise was not peace. It was winter before an avalanche. The avalanche began at noon. A faculty-wide rumor appeared in the student forum. Oral exam candidate sabotages entire dorm after personal grudge. Anonymous, but Elise's fingerprints were all over the phrasing. The post did not name me, but it did not need to. It mentioned room 608, backup alarms, unknown controlling student, and 6 candidates, missing the first block. Comments bloomed instantly. Some were sympathetic to the late candidates. Some mocked them. Some asked why grown adults needed a roommate alarm. One comment made my blood run cold. Heard she documents people secretly.
Creepy.
Another. She passed because she only cared about herself. Another. Imagine becoming a doctor with zero empathy. The old fear rose sharp and familiar. Public opinion does not need truth. It needs a shape. Elise had given it one. For 10 minutes, I sat frozen at my new desk while room 412's quiet turned fragile around me. Then I opened my folder. In my first life, I had waited for rumors to fade because I believed dignity meant silence. Silence, I learned, is only dignified when power is already on your side. When silence leaves lies unchallenged, it becomes unpaid labor for your enemy. I did not write an emotional defense. I did not name Elise. I posted one comment under my own name. As the candidate being referenced, I will not discuss private student conduct online. However, I did arrive before 6, signed in properly, passed my oral exam, and had reminded my roommates the night before to set their own alarms and prepare documents. Administration reviewed the petition today. Please do not spread claims that are not based on verified facts. I attached no screenshots. Not yet. Evidence is strongest when shown to authorities and hinted to crowds. Within minutes, replies shifted. Wait, they were reminded? Before 6? Adults needing wake-up service is wild. Someone asked, did admin deny the petition? I did not answer.
Professor Sato's office did.
At 12:37, the student forum thread was locked by administration. At 12:42, an official notice appeared. Students are reminded that attendance for examinations is an individual responsibility. Harassment, retaliation, or dissemination of misleading claims regarding examination procedures may result in conduct review. No names. No drama. A public umbrella held over my head without saying it was raining on me. The rumor did not die, but it changed direction. People love scandal, but they love incompetence too. And 6 medical students slept through oral exams after laughing at alarm reminders, had a comic cruelty that spread faster than Elise's version. Memes appeared by evening. A cartoon stethoscope sleeping through an alarm, a fake dorm service advertisement reading, roommate wake-up package, blame included. I did not laugh. Not because it was not funny. Because I knew humiliation could make cornered people reckless. 2 days later, Elise requested a private meeting with the Scholarship Advisory Board. I found out because Priya told me, voice shaking, outside the histology lab. She's saying the missed oral exam happened because of hostile dorm conditions. Hostile by whom? Priya looked miserable. She's implying you. Of course. When one door closes, Elise does not knock. She claims the hallway attacked her. The scholarship mattered. Elise and I were both candidates for the same Clinical Excellence Award, the one she had won in my first life after my record collapsed. It came with tuition support, hospital placement priority, and a line on the CV sharp enough to cut years off struggle. If she could not erase her 0, she could stain my 92. Are you part of the statement? I asked. Priya shook her head quickly.
No.
I refused. My father said if I lie and get caught, he won't help with tuition. Fear again, but this time on truth's side. Tessa? Refuse. Yun? Already submitted correction. Maya? Priya winced. There it was. Maya's anger needed somewhere to live, and Elise always offered furnished rooms. The advisory board meeting was scheduled for Friday. I was not invited at first. I requested inclusion after receiving notice that concerns regarding peer conduct had been raised in connection with my name. My request was granted, probably because Ms. Ibrahimova had already flagged retaliation risk. I spent Thursday preparing not for an exam, but for a person. That distinction mattered. Exams ask what you know. People like Elise ask whether you can remain yourself while they rearrange the room. I built a timeline with 4 columns. Time, event, evidence, witnesses. I printed the group chat reminder, my arrival confirmation, sign-in record, my exam feedback, the petition, corrected statements from June and Tessa, Priya's brief email admitting personal responsibility, and the forum notice. I also transcribed the voice memo of Elise saying, "We say she created a dependency and then withdrew without warning." I debated including the audio. Recording laws and university policy were tricky. I did not want to become vulnerable by using it carelessly. So I wrote contemporaneous personal note from overheard conversation instead and kept the file private unless asked. Victory is not dumping every weapon on the table. Victory is knowing which ones can legally fire. On Friday morning, I wore the same navy blazer from the oral exam, freshly pressed. Not because clothes decide truth, but because presentation decides how long some people listen before doubting it. The scholarship office occupied the top floor of the administration building, with glass walls and potted plants that looked healthier than most students. Elise sat outside when I arrived, wearing a pale blue blouse and pearl earrings. She looked up, then smiled with devastating sweetness. I hoped you wouldn't come. I know. You're escalating everything. You attach my name to your consequences. She sighed. Do you ever get tired of sounding like a legal document? I thought about my first life. The appeal letters, the policy quotes, the desperate emails written at 2 a.m. while fever crawled through my bones. No, I said. Legal documents outlive moods. Her smile faltered. Inside, 3 board members sat with Ms. Ibrahimova as observer. The chair, Dr. Petrescu, had always intimidated me. Silver hair, sharp suits, a gaze that made excuses decompose. In my first life, she had congratulated Elise at the award ceremony while I watched from the back, pretending I had only come for the refreshments. Now she gestured to the chairs. We will review concerns regarding examination conduct and scholarship suitability. Ms. Han, you requested this meeting. Begin. Elise began beautifully. She did not accuse me outright. She spoke of dorm culture, emotional strain, unexpected withdrawal of support, and patterns of controlling assistance. She admitted the late arrival but framed it as the symptom of an unhealthy dependency I had fostered. She said she worried not only for herself, but for future clinical teams where my need to be indispensable might create risk. It was brilliant in the way venomous things can be brilliant. Every sentence placed my kindness on trial. When she finished, Dr. Petrescu turned to me. Miss Park. I opened my folder. I will respond with a timeline. Not feelings. Not outrage. Timeline. I walked them from 11:30, 2 p.m. reminder to 5:08 departure, 5:34 building arrival, 6:25 sign-in, 6:45 attendance closure, 7 o'clock exam, 7:24 late arrival, 10 o'clock petition, 2 o'clock procedural review. I provided documents one by one. I did not say Elise lied. I said, this statement is contradicted by the group chat. I did not say Maya was foolish. I said, this claim is not supported by residence logs. I did not say I had been exploited. I said, no formal or informal agreement exists in writing showing I accepted responsibility for peer attendance. Then I looked directly at the board. I am concerned that ordinary personal preparedness is being reframed as misconduct because others relied on it without my consent. Dr. Petrescu's pen paused. That sentence mattered. I felt it land. Elise leaned forward. That sounds reasonable until you know the social context. Social context does not change attendance policy, Dr. Petrescu said. Elise flushed. No, but medicine requires teamwork. I answered before the board could. Teamwork is not one student being blamed for 6 students ignoring their alarms. Dr. Petrescu's mouth twitched once, almost a smile. Elise saw it and changed tactics again, faster than a blink. I'm worried about Lena's hostility. She moved rooms immediately. She refused mediation. She's been collecting evidence against us. Ms. Ibrahimova spoke for the first time. The room transfer was approved by Student Affairs due to the petition naming Ms. Park and potential retaliation concerns. Mediation is not required when active academic allegations are unresolved. Elise's face stiffened. She had expected the word mediation to make me look unreasonable. Instead, it made the office remember why I had left. Then Dr. Petrescu asked the question that split everything open. Ms. Han, why did your phone not alarm? Elise blinked. It died overnight. Was it plugged in? Yes. Resident staff checked room 608 after the petition. Your outlet was functioning. The charger must have been loose. Who plugged it in? I did. So the failure was your own device preparation. Elise's lips parted. I suppose, technically. And yet your petition suggested Ms. Park materially contributed. Because she knew I relied on her. Dr. Petrescu leaned back. Ms. Han, do Do you understand how concerning that statement is for clinical professionalism? Silence. You relied on a peer without confirmation, failed to prepare your own device, arrived late, then attempted to shift responsibility onto the peer who arrived on time. In clinical settings, that pattern is not teamwork. It is risk displacement. Risk displacement. The phrase glowed. I wanted to frame it. Elise tried once more. I was under extreme pressure. Dr. Petrescu's voice softened, which somehow made it harsher. Pressure reveals systems. It does not excuse false attribution. She turned to me. Miss Park, thank you. You may both leave while the board discusses scholarship implications. In the hallway, Elise's composure finally cracked. Not loudly. Her eyes filled, but this time the tears seemed hot with rage rather than strategy. You had to destroy me, she whispered. No, I said. I stopped repairing you. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand, smearing mascara. For 1 second, she looked painfully young. Then she laughed, small and ugly. You think they'll choose you now? A scholarship board hates scandal. Then you shouldn't have made one. The door opened before she could answer. Ms. Ibrahimova called us back in. The board's decision was not the dramatic public execution a younger version of me might have fantasized about. Real consequences often arrive in administrative language. Elise's scholarship application would be placed under review pending completion of a professionalism remediation module and confirmation of academic standing after the 0 oral component. My application would proceed unaffected. The missed exam would remain a 0.
No reschedule.
No shared alarm exception.
No hasta dorm excuse.
Elise sat motionless as the words landed. For her, under review, was humiliation. For me, unaffected, was resurrection. Dr. Petrescu added, Ms. Hahn, further attempts to attribute your late arrival to Ms. Park without evidence will be treated as retaliation. Elise nodded once.
She did not look at me.
By Monday, the whole cohort knew enough to stop asking me for details and start setting their own alarms. That was the funniest part. My private rebellion became a public health campaign. In lectures, phones chimed at odd intervals because students were testing backup alerts. Someone brought a battery alarm clock to pathology and placed it on the desk like a mascot. The student forum banned anonymous posts about exam conduct. Resident staff sent a dorm-wide reminder titled Personal Responsibility for Examination Attendance, and Room 608 became a cautionary phrase. Don't pull a 608, students whispered when someone joked about sleeping late. Maya hated me openly for it. Priya avoided me with embarrassed politeness. Tessa joined a study group outside the dorm and slowly stopped looking like she might cry at any moment. June began sitting beside me in lecture sometimes, not as if we were friends again, but as if she was practicing being someone who did not look away. Elise remained beautiful, organized, and terrifyingly quiet. Quiet did not mean finished. 2 weeks later, during clinical skills practice, I discovered my printed case notes missing from my bag.
Not all of them.
Just the set for a pediatric respiratory assessment, the one we needed for a graded simulation. In my first life, I would have panicked, searched wildly, accused no one, and borrowed incomplete notes while Elise watched with sympathy. This time, I looked at the empty folder, felt my heartbeat rise, and then reached into the inner pocket of my backpack for the second copy. Backup habits, once mocked, now felt like ancestral magic. Across the lab, Elise's eyes flicked to my hands. Just once. Enough. I laid the duplicate notes on the table and began reviewing with Anika. 10 minutes later, a classmate found my original notes in the trash bin near the women's bathroom, damp but readable. She brought them in, confused. Lena, are these yours? The lab went silent. Elise did not look up from her clipboard. I took the wet pages, thanked the classmate, and did not accuse anyone. Instead, I reported the incident to Student Affairs with photos, time, location, and witness. Patterns matter. 1 event is misfortune. 2 is shape. The next week, my locker jammed before anatomy lab. The key turned halfway and stuck. Inside were my gloves, lab coat, and ID badge. In my first life, this would have derailed me completely. I would have begged, borrowed, arrived flustered, and given Elise another chance to whisper about instability. This time, I had a spare lab coat in room 412 and a photo of my ID badge approved for temporary access. Nino, seeing me calmly retrieve the spare, said, "You live like someone keeps trying to assassinate your schedule." I laughed for the first time in days. Something like that. Maintenance later found a sliver of plastic lodged in the locker mechanism. Not proof of Elise. Not proof of anyone. But I added it to the file.
Drip, drip, drip.
Documentation is boring until the ceiling collapses. The collapse came from Maya, not Elise. Anger makes poor locksmiths. During a pharmacology seminar, Maya cornered me near the back stairs and said, "You ruined our year, and now you're trying to ruin Elise's scholarship too." I kept walking toward the camera near the stairwell entrance. She followed. "Do you know what people say about you? That you're cold. That you'd watch someone drown if they forgot to ask nicely." I stopped under the camera. "Are you finished?"
No.
"I hope your precious alarms fail one day." "They did," I said. She frowned, confused. I looked at her and saw not an enemy, exactly, but a girl who had mistaken dependence for friendship and shame for injustice. That's why I bought more. She called me a name then, ugly enough that a passing lecturer turned. Maya flushed and walked away. By evening, I had an email from Student Affairs asking whether I wanted to file a conduct complaint. I did not. Not yet. Maya was noise. Elise was architecture. At the end of the month, scholarship interviews began. I prepared obsessively, but not in the frantic, self-erasing way of my first life. I practiced answers with Nino timing me. I ate breakfast. I slept. I set 2 alarms and then, for the first time, trusted myself enough not to set 5. The interview panel included Dr. Petrescu, a hospital education coordinator, and an external clinician from the Children's Hospital. They asked why I wanted the Clinical Excellence Award. In my first life, I had prepared a polished answer about service, leadership, and academic passion. This time, I told the truth carefully. I want to become the kind of clinician who is reliable without becoming exploitable and compassionate without confusing compassion with taking responsibility away from others. This year taught me that professionalism includes boundaries. Patients need support, but teams also need accountability. Dr. Petrescu's eyes sharpened with recognition. The external clinician nodded. That is a mature distinction. I thought of the alarm screaming in the dark, of 6 sleeping girls, of my hand on the doorknob. "I learned it the hard way," I said. Elise's interview was after mine. I passed her in the hallway. She wore a white blouse and carried a leather portfolio.
Perfect again.
For a moment, we looked like 2 versions of success waiting outside the same door. She smiled. "Whatever happens, Lena, I hope you know I forgive you." I almost admired the desperation of saying it where board members might overhear. "For what?" I asked pleasantly. Her smile tightened. The hospital coordinator glanced up from his papers. Elise could not answer without naming a crime that did not exist. "For everything," she said softly. I nodded. That must be tiring. Then I walked away. Behind me, the interview room door opened, and Dr. Petrescu called her name. The award results were posted on a Friday afternoon. Not emailed privately, not announced at a ceremony, just a PDF uploaded to the faculty page with the bland title 2026 Clinical Excellence, Scholarship Outcomes. My name was first. Lena Park, awarded. Elise's name was not on the list. Not deferred. Not runner-up. Absent. I stared at the PDF until Nino leaned over my shoulder and screamed loud enough for room 412 to think someone had been injured. Within minutes, my phone filled with messages. Anika sent 10 clapping emojis. My mother called, crying again. June wrote, "You deserved it." Priya wrote, "Congratulations, truly." Tessa sent a small heart. Maya sent nothing. Elise sent one message. "You built your success on our failure." I read it twice, not because it hurt, but because it was such a perfect summary of her worldview. Other people's refusal to cushion her fall felt, to her, like theft. I typed back one sentence before blocking her. "No, Elise. I stopped letting you build yours on mine." Blocking her felt less dramatic than I expected.
No Sander.
No spiritual release. Just a small digital boundary closing with a tap. But that evening, when I walked across campus to meet my mother for dinner, she had taken 2 buses after work because she insisted scholarship news required soup. I noticed the world differently. The faculty building no longer looked like a ship I had barely reached. It looked like a building. The dorm courtyard no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like wet grass, cracked pavement, students laughing too loudly, someone's umbrella turning inside out in the wind. Trauma had made ordinary places enormous. Safety, slowly, was shrinking them back. My mother cried when she saw me, then scolded me for being too thin, then cried again when I showed her the scholarship email. We ate at a small noodle shop near campus where the tables wobbled and the owner always played old love songs. She held my hand across the table. "You sound different," she said. "Older."
No.
"More like yourself." That nearly undid me. In my first life, by this point I had already begun disappearing into apology. My mother had watched helplessly as I became smaller, quieter, more eager to prove I was not what they said. Now, sitting under yellow restaurant lights with steam warming my face, I realized rebirth had not given me a new personality. It had returned the one I had surrendered piece by piece for acceptance. "Mom," I said, "do you think being kind means helping even when people don't respect you?" She did not answer quickly. She never wasted wisdom by rushing it. "Kindness without respect becomes labor," she said finally. "And labor without pay is slavery." I laughed, shocked. "Mom." She shrugged. "I clean rich people's offices. I know many philosophies." The semester did not become easy after that. Stories that end at the first victory lie. Elise did not vanish. She remained in lectures, in labs, in the corner of my vision. The 0 in her oral exam dragged her course grade down, and the scholarship loss wounded her status. But wounded status can make a person more dangerous, not less. She rebuilt herself through sympathy with students outside our year, telling softer versions where no one was guilty and everyone had suffered. She volunteered for committees. She smiled at professors. She posted study tips online. People like Elise rarely collapse permanently because society loves polished surfaces and rarely asks who wipes them clean. But she no longer had room 608 as a kingdom. Tessa moved out mid-semester. Priya stopped lending Elise clothes. June refused to share assignment drafts. Maya stayed loyal longest, then failed a practical after relying on Elise's summary sheet that left out half the rubric. Loyalty has a half-life when it keeps costing marks. One afternoon, months after the oral exam, I found Elise alone in the old courtyard, sitting under the tree where rainwater collected in the roots. She looked tired. Not theatrically tired. Truly. Her hair was tied back carelessly, and without her usual makeup, the shadows under her eyes looked bruised. I considered walking past. She saw me before I could decide. "Lena," she said.
No sweetness.
No audience. Just my name. I stopped several feet away. Distance is not hostility. It is architecture. "What?" She looked down at her hands. "Did you ever think we could have been friends?" The question irritated me because a tiny part of me had once wanted that so badly it hurt. Orientation Elise had been dazzling. She knew where to buy cheap fruit, how to charm resident staff, which professors hated late citations. She made people feel chosen. I had mistaken being chosen for being valued. "In another version," I said. She looked up sharply, and for one wild second I wondered again if she sensed the impossible. "What does that mean?" "It means maybe if you hadn't needed friends to be mirrors." She laughed softly, without humor. "You always talk like you're in a novel. And you always talk like someone is grading your vulnerability." Her face tightened, then loosened. "My father did, actually." There it was again, the unfinished sentence from the corridor, now completed in a smaller voice. "Every grade, every ranking, every kilo, every friend. If I wasn't first, I was wasting what he paid for." I stood still. The old me would have stepped closer. The old me would have turned confession into absolution. The new me listened without opening the gate. That sounds awful, I said. She smiled faintly. But not enough? Not enough to make what you did okay. Her eyes shone. No, the word surprised me. Not because it healed anything, but because I had never heard Elise place a period after her own wrongdoing. She looked back at her hands. I hated you that morning. I know. Because you looked free. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I was terrified. Still. She wiped her cheek quickly, angry at the tear. You left. I thought about the doorknob at 5:08, Priya mumbling. Don't forget, my hand shaking, the corridor waiting. I thought about all the moral lectures people give responsible girls, how they dress exploitation as community and abandonment as sin. I thought about patients I might one day treat, alarms I would answer, emergencies I would run toward because they were truly mine to face. Then I thought about 6 adults sleeping through a morning they had mocked me for preparing. Yes, I said. I left. Elise nodded slowly. I don't forgive you. It should have sounded threatening. It sounded almost honest. I didn't ask. She laughed once, and this time it was real enough to be sad.
No.
You don't ask for much anymore. I ask myself. I walked away before the conversation could become a bridge neither of us should cross. The final oral remediation for late candidates happened at the end of term. They were allowed, under a separate policy, to complete a capped reassessment for progression, but the original 0 remained for grade calculation.
Priya passed. Tessa passed. Yoon passed strongly.
Maya barely passed. Elise passed too, of course. She was never stupid. That had always been the tragedy and the danger. Stupidity would have made her easier to hate. Competence made her choices clearer. At the end of the exam day, I saw room 608's old members leaving the faculty building separately, no longer a pack. Each carried her own bag, her own documents, her own consequences. It looked ordinary. It looked like growth, or at least the beginning of inconvenience becoming responsibility. Months later, at the clinical excellence ceremony, I stood on stage in a black dress my mother had altered herself and accepted the award Elise had once taken from the wreckage of my life. The applause was not thunderous. University ceremonies never are. Half the audience is hungry, and the microphone always crackles. But when Dr. Petreska shook my hand, she said quietly, reliability with boundaries.
Keep that.
I smiled. I will. In the front row, my mother filmed badly, the camera tilted, her thumb covering half the screen. I loved her for it. Across the hall, Elise stood near the back. She had come after all. Not with flowers. Not with tears. Just standing, arms folded, watching. When our eyes met, she did not smile. I did not either. Some stories do not end with enemies destroyed. Some end with them forced to see you standing where they once buried you. After the ceremony, Professor Sato asked me to speak to first-year students during orientation about exam preparation. The irony almost made me choke. I stood before a lecture hall of nervous new faces and held up my small battery-powered travel alarm. This, I said, is not dramatic. It is not paranoia. It is professionalism. They laughed politely. I told them to set multiple alarms, pack documents the night before, photograph important slips, know their exam location, charge their phones, and never rely on one roommate, one device, one plan, or one person's kindness as infrastructure. I did not tell them about rebirth. I did not tell them about hospital stairs or funeral flowers or the taste of being blamed for a disaster I had prevented once and refused to prevent again. But I told them the truth underneath all of it. Helping each other matters, I said. But help is not a substitute for responsibility. The person who reminds you is not the person who owes you rescue. Afterward, a shy first-year girl approached me. Isn't it selfish to leave early alone if your friends might need you? She asked. The question was so sincere, I felt the past lean close. I could have answered sharply. Instead, I looked at her the way I wish someone had looked at me before I mistook self-erasure for goodness. It depends, I said. Did they ask for help respectfully? Did you agree? Are you safe? Are you sacrificing your own duty to cover someone else's neglect? Friendship can include waking someone once. It cannot mean becoming the alarm they refuse to set. She nodded slowly, and I saw understanding begin, fragile as dawn. That night, I returned to room 412, placed the travel alarm on my desk, and set it for 6:30 a.m. Not because anyone needed me, not because fear ruled me, because I had a hospital placement orientation, and I liked arriving early. Nino glanced over from her bed. "One alarm only?" she teased. I smiled.
2.
My watch is back up. Healthy paranoia. Professional preparedness, I corrected. She threw a pillow at me, and for once, laughter in a dorm room did not sound like a trap. Before sleeping, I checked my old private reminder chat. The message from the morning of my rebirth was still there. Arrived at exam building 534. Alone. Room 608 still asleep when I left. I read it again, then typed a new message beneath it. Passed.
Moved. Survived.
Chose myself. My thumb hovered over send. The old me had spent years waiting for someone else to testify that I had been wronged. The new me had become my own witness. I sent the message and turned off the lamp. In the dark, the backup alarm's tiny red light blinked on my desk like a heartbeat. Once, I thought alarms existed to drag me into other people's emergencies. Now I understood. An alarm is a promise you make to your future self. Wake up. Stand up. Do not miss what matters because someone else mocked your preparation. Do not hand your morning to people who call your discipline anxiety and your boundaries cruelty. Do not confuse being needed with being loved. And when the room that used you sleeps through the consequences they earned, walk quietly into the dawn, sign your own name, answer your own question, and let the door close behind you.